The following video has major spoilers for Avengers Endgame. Generally speaking, I think almost every inaccuracy in Avengers Endgame can be explained away with some imagination by the audience, but there is one glaring contradiction in the story that makes very little sense, and it concerns Captain America, specifically old Captain America at the end of the movie. The particular type of time travel utilized in Endgame is the alternate timeline branch point time travel, as opposed to closed loop time travel. Allow me to explain the difference between the two. Closed loop time travel is just as it sounds. There is one continuous timeline. You travel back in time from today, 2019, to let's say the 1950s, and you kill your own grandfather. You instantly disappear, as you could never have existed because your grandfather was killed before you could have been born. Although, how could you have actually gone back in the first place if you killed your own grandfather? This is called the grandfather paradox. So let's say you used the closed loop time travel model to do something much less destructive. Let's say you time traveled back into last week and gave your past self the winning lottery numbers. Your past self takes those numbers, plays the lottery and wins, and then you travel back to the present day. You return to find that your world has changed. You've literally changed your own timeline by changing the past. You return to the current week, but now you're a millionaire. In closed-loop time travel, the past you changed is connected to the future you just arrived from, and when you return to that future, it will be different after the changes you made. So how does this differ from branch point time travel? Well, branch point time travel is actually a bit more logical. In this theory, if you go back in time and kill your grandfather in the distant past, nothing will change. You won't disappear. You can even return to your own future and find that nothing is different. You never killed your grandfather in your own timeline because when you went back in time, you actually created a new alternate timeline just by dint of being there, because after all, you weren't there originally. This is the kind of time travel that Avengers Endgame incorporates. This is the reason that future Nebula is able to kill her past self without any consequences. She doesn't suddenly disappear, because she's actually killing an alternate version of herself from a different timeline. This is the reason the team is able to go back and retrieve the Infinity Stones from different points of the past without any changes being made to their own timeline. Their own history remains intact. They could actually go back and mess with time as much as they like. Their own timeline will not be affected because going back has created an alternate branch point timeline. Likewise, in this model, if you went back to last week and gave yourself the lottery numbers and then returned to the present, you'd find that nothing would have changed. You still wouldn't be a lottery winner because you merely gave the lottery numbers to a past version of yourself from an alternate timeline. Branch point time travel basically means that you can't change your own past. You can only alter the past of alternate timelines. At the end of Endgame, the team has to return the Infinity Stones to the points in time they retrieved them from. Truth be told, they actually don't need to do this. But if they didn't, the universe they took them from would have some serious problems in the future, obviously. So Steve Rogers, Captain America, agrees to bring them back. But he decides to stay in the past so he can live out his life with his lady love, Peggy Carter. Sam, Bucky, and Hulk then see an elderly Steve Rogers sitting on a bench near a lake. He's lived an entire lifetime and finally caught up with the present day as an old man. Except this outcome is actually a massive inaccuracy that contradicts the film's branch point time travel model. Steve should have gone back to an alternate timeline where they took the stones from. So if he had lived out an entire lifetime with Peggy, he shouldn't be sitting on that bench. How did he return to his own timeline in the present? That's the kind of thing we would expect to see if this film's story made use of closed-loop time travel, whereby Steve living out his life gradually returns him to the point in the present where he went back in time. This is not consistent with the branch point time travel model of the film's plot, so it seems as if the writers mixed up the film's time travel logic here. Hulk, Bucky, and Sam should never have seen Steve Rogers again. In addition, if Steve went back in time and lived with Peggy and they got married, then that would mean that he changed her past, thus making it so that Peggy would never have married her original husband and she would never have had a family with him. After all, Sharon Carter, who appeared in Captain America, the Winter Soldier and Civil War, is her grandniece. Sharon would never have existed also, which means Steve would have made her disappear from the timeline, if this was a closed loop, that is. Now, it's possible that Peggy's life with her original husband and family continues to exist in an alternate timeline somewhere, but this is just weird and makes no sense. There's no logical consistency here. Is it branch point time travel or is it fixed loop? Pick one. You can't have both. The bottom line is, elderly Steve Rogers showing up on the bench at the end of Endgame shouldn't have happened if the story was continuously following branch point time travel. The only convoluted explanation I can come up with is that somehow old Steve was able to find a means of returning to his original timeline. This would have required a time machine and Pym particles. Maybe the alternate timeline versions of Tony Stark and/or the Hulk would have found a way to send him back. The Russo brothers recently clarified that Steve did indeed create an alternate branched universe when he went back in time, suggesting that he must have found a way to return to his own universe in the future in order to give Sam his shield. But this sounds to me like they're trying to resolve a plot hole after the fact. After all, we never got this explanation in the film. And as the saying goes, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. I can kind of forgive this mistake, however, because the moment at the end of the film where old Steve Rogers gives Sam his shield and passes the torch to him, well, it's a sweet scene. It's very poignant. It gives closure to the story arc of Steve Rogers, and it means that he finally got what he really wanted, which is his life with Peggy Carter. I think that ultimately it serves the story well, but it's still a huge logical inconsistency and a pretty big plot hole.